It sure has been a while, 3 years to be exact, since Stranger Things left us with a hell of a cliffhanger, but season 4 is finally almost here. You'd be forgiven if you forgot about everything that went down in Hawkins, Indiana, and under Hawkins, Indiana, so let's get back up to speed on what happened to our favorite monster-fighting kiddos. It's 1983 in the small, unassuming town of Hawkins, Indiana, which seems normal enough until we discover a pretty shady-seeming lab there, where we see a scientist swallowed up by some kind of monster. Meanwhile, Will, Dustin, Lucas, and Mike are wrapping up an intense session of Dungeons & Dragons, and on his way home, Will gets taken by some kind of monster. His mother, Joyce, reports it to the police when he doesn't come home, and Police Chief Hopper starts a search. Eventually.
Just find my son, Hop. Find him!
Meanwhile, on the other side of town, a young girl ends up at a diner, and the well-meaning owner, Benny, calls social services. Social services do not show up. Instead, an agent of Hawkins' lab does and kills Benny. Poor Benny. The girl, who we learned is named 11, escapes, though, and finds Dustin, Lucas, and Mike in the woods. Meanwhile, Joyce gets a mysterious phone call she believes is from Will. The boys take 11 to Mike's basement, ply her with Eggos, and after she recognizes Will in a photo, realize they can use her superpowers to help find Will. Oh yeah, 11 has superpowers, by the way.
We never would have upset you if we knew you had superpowers.
She tells them Will is in the Upside Down and is being hunted by the very scary Demogorgon. In more normal teenage shenanigans, Mike's sister Nancy convinces her friend Barb to go to a party with her, where she promptly leaves her by herself to go have sex with her boyfriend Steve. That's where Barb is attacked by the Demogorgon as well. On the bright side, Will's brother Jonathan, who just so happens to be taking photos outside the house, creepy, is able to catch the Demogorgon on camera, and Joyce, who keeps getting signs of Will, sees the creature coming through the wall. Steve and his friends find Will's photo and destroy them, but don't worry, Nancy will later be able to piece together the remains enough to see that Barb was attacked by a monster that fits Joyce's description of it. Hopper gets deeper into his investigation, finding some alleged shady business surrounding the lab's insidious Dr. Brenner. Joyce has crafted a pretty ingenious Christmas light-powered setup in an attempt to communicate with Will, and she does, but then the Demogorgon bursts through the wall. While all this happens, Will's body is discovered in a lake. Seems bleak, right? Well, believe it or not, all hope is not lost. Hopper goes right to the morgue and finds out that the body is indeed a dummy. No human organs, just stuffing. Plus, 11 is able to channel his voice through a walkie-talkie. After a very 80s makeover montage,
Wow. She looks pretty.
The boys break her into their middle school so she can use its radio station to try and communicate with Will, and they hear him talking with Joyce. Digging deeper, the kids ask their science teacher about alternate dimensions and learn, theoretically, that a gate could connect them. Well, guess who discovered one of those gates? Jonathan and Nancy in the woods! Nancy gets a little too curious, but luckily Jonathan pulls her back out. The boys and 11 get into a fight after 11 misleads them out of fear of seeing the Demogorgon again, and then flings Lucas with ease.
Accident or not, admit it was a little awesome.
Steve and Nancy are fighting over how close she's getting with Jonathan, and then Jonathan and Steve get into a fist fight, and everyone's fighting, really. Some of the tension subsides after 11 uses her powers to rescue Mike and Dustin from bullies, though, and Joyce and Hopper do some more investigation into the lab's experiments, tracking down a woman named Terry Ives who believes her daughter, Jane, aka 11, was taken by Brenner to be used for her superpowers. We learn that she was indeed being used to spy on the Russians, and during one of these sessions accidentally opened a gate to the Upside Down. Oops. The agents of the lab have tracked down 11 and are on the chase, but 11 flips their van without suffering more than a nosebleed. Everyone eventually meets back up and shares their knowledge, and they craft a makeshift sensory deprivation tank in the middle school so 11 can try to find Barb and Will. She does, and well, Barb is quite dead. Justice for Barb, please. But she does manage to find Will, who is alive, and that's good. Joyce and Hopper discover the gate to the Upside Down is in the basement of the Hawkins lab, so they break in and are swiftly apprehended. Hopper gives up 11's location in exchange for being able to go into the Upside Down to save Will. Lab agents arrive at the middle school, who are pretty much all killed by 11. That attracts the Demogorgon, who attacks and seemingly kills Brenner. 11 also dispenses with the Demogorgon, but not without vanishing herself. But hey, Hopper and Joyce saved Will at least, so all's good, right? Well, not really. A month later, he coughs up some black sludge and has a brief vision of the Upside Down. You didn't think it would be over that easily, did you? In Season 2, about a year later, we pick up with the boys doing fairly normal kid stuff, preparing for Halloween, and ogling over a new girl at school, Max.
Stop spying on me, creeps.
Also, Joyce has a boyfriend, Bob. Good for Joyce. And Bob. That doesn't mean all's back to normal, however. Hopper investigates a field of mysteriously rotting pumpkins, and a journalist, Murray, believes that 11 was a Russian spy. Barb's parents believe Barb is just missing and not monster food and hire Murray to look into it. Will's still having visions of the Upside Down, which the Hawkins lab director Owens believes is just PTSD. And oh yeah, 11 is alive and secretly living with Hopper.
Dinner first, then dessert. Always.
We learn through flashbacks that 11 escaped the Upside Down but is living with Hopper to hide from Hawkins' lab agents. Hopper is in full strict dad mode, keeping her housebound. Nancy wants to tell Barb's parents the truth about their very dead daughter, but Steve thinks it's a bad idea and they get into a drunken fight at a party.
You're bullshit.
After Max's absolutely psychotic stepbrother almost runs the boys over, Max finally agrees to hang out with them on Halloween night. But the fun is interrupted after Will has another episode. He tells Mike what he's been experiencing, and Mike admits that he's been trying to contact 11. Meanwhile, Dustin finds a wacky creature in his trash can. Classic Hawkins. Dustin names the little guy Dart, and upon showing it to the gang, Will concludes it's from the Upside Down. We learn through flashbacks that Hopper found 11 in the woods and agreed to take care of her as long as she stays holed up in his cabin. But he'll soon learn you can't keep a superpowered kid cooped up for too long. While Hopper investigates some weird substance in the rotting pumpkin fields, 11 sneaks out to the middle school where she finds Mike and Max and mistakes their banner for flirting, causing her to fling Max off her board and leave. A very well-intentioned Bob encourages Will to face his fears, but little does Bob know that Will's fears are very real. Upon suffering from another vision of the Upside Down, Will confronts the monster and it possesses him. Luckily, Joyce and the kids find Will and are able to get him home, but he's acting a little strange. He demands the house be kept cold and starts scribbling some kinda weird stuff. Joyce and Hopper line the drawings up, and Hopper guesses that they're meant to represent vines. Nancy and Jonathan are still on the Barb case as they try to contact Barb's mother and tell her the truth, but they're caught by agents from Hawkins' lab. They talk to Owens, who admits Barb died and that he's been trying to hide it from foreign governments, and Nancy was recording the conversation the whole time. Sneaky Nancy. On the other side of town, Lucas has a big old crush on Max and tries to get closer to her, but her absolute jerk of a stepbrother stands in the way. 11 and Hopper get into a big argument over her sneaking out, during which she destroys the cabin's windows and she discovers Hopper's research into her mother. And Dustin's new pet Dart is not proving to be the cute domestic reptile he might have expected. It's devoured his cat, justice for Muse, and Hopper's found a tunnel to the Upside Down in one of the pumpkin fields. Hopper ends up becoming trapped in the Upside Down and Will has a vision of him there. Enter Bob the Brain. Though he's growing understandably concerned about the buyer's shenanigans, he deduces that Will's drawings are a map of Hawkins and that Hopper probably went to the pumpkin field. Jonathan and Nancy visit Murray to tell him their findings, and he convinces them to water their story down a bit to make it more palatable. Dustin begins the Babysitter Steve arc by enlisting him to help recapture Dart. Lucas tells Max the truth about Hawkins, Will, 11, and, well, everything else, and 11 tracks down her mother, discovering that they're able to communicate telepathically. Joyce, Bob, Will, and Mike are able to rescue Hopper, but when they do, lab agents show up and set the tunnels ablaze, which does not go well with Will. Will is rushed to the lab and can't remember much, and Owens theorizes that the monster has infected Will's brain and that destroying the tunnels would kill him. Back at Murray's though, Nancy and Jonathan finally hook up, those crazy kids. They also send the tape of Owens' admission to several newspapers. Steve and Dustin group up with Lucas and Max, and they attempt to lure out Dart before a pack of monsters descends on them. At the lab, Will tells Owens about a place that the monster prevents him from seeing, but it's all a trap by the Shadow Monster. Owens sends a team of investigators to check it out, and they're promptly devoured by the monsters that were about to devour Steve and company. But wait, standalone episode time.
Bitchin'.
11 found another girl in her mother's memories, Kali, and makes a trip to Chicago to meet her. She finds out that Kali also has powers and lives with a group that wants to take revenge on Brenner, but 11 tells them that Brenner is dead, so happy medium, find the guy who tortured 11's mom. They do find him, but 11 refuses to kill him upon seeing a photo of his two kids, who happen to be calling the cops. 11 decides to ditch the street gang and go back to Hawkins after seeing a vision of Mike and Will in the lab. And things are not going well at the lab. Monsters are attacking, Will is sedated, and the gang barricades themselves in a room, but the power goes out. Bob resets the breakers, which allows Mike, Joyce, Hopper, and Will to escape, but then the monsters kill Bob right in front of Joyce. Justice for Bob. The survivors are rescued by Jonathan and Nancy, and Dustin theorizes that killing the Shadow Monster, which we're calling the Mind Flayer, by the way,
This is the best metaphor.
Analogy.
That's what you're worried about.
will kill anything connected to it. Through Morse code, the real Will is able to tell them to close the gate. The Mind Flayer and his demo dog goons have found them, but 11 arrives just in the nick of time, and with a makeover no less. With everyone reunited, a plan is formed. Hopper and 11 will go to the lab to close the gate. Jonathan, Nancy, and Joyce will stick with Will and try to overheat the virus out of him, and Mike, Dustin, Lucas, Max, and Steve will lure the demo dogs away from Hopper and 11 from the tunnels. And wouldn't you know it, it works! Despite an ill-timed interruption from Billy, that guy's the worst.
From here on out, you leave me and my friends alone. Do you understand?
11 closes the gate, Will is freed from the virus, and they all go to the dance. Lucas and Max even kiss, as do Mike and 11, but of course the Mind Flayer is still watching. How could he not be? Season 3 picks up a year later, and love is in the air. Plus, Hawkins got a fancy new Starcourt shopping mall. Mike and 11 are happily dating and have been making out all summer, much to Hopper's chagrin, who basically threatens Mike into keeping his distance.
You want to see real crazy?
Lucas and Max are still happily dating too, as are Nancy and Jonathan, who got internships at the local paper. Even Dustin apparently got a girlfriend at science camp. And the romance isn't limited to the kiddos. Billy and Mrs. Wheeler make plans to meet up for an affair, but Mrs. Wheeler backs out at the last minute. On his way to the rendezvous, Billy has some car trouble and ends up being dragged into a mill by some kind of monster. Billy manages to escape the mill, but he's far from out of the woods, kidnapping Heather, a fellow lifeguard, and taking her to the monster. Nancy and Jonathan explore a lead on some rabid rats, and Eleven and Max have a fun girls' day at the mall. Eleven breaks up with Mike for avoiding her in a very Eleven way.
I dump your ass.
Hopper finally bucked up and asked Joyce on a date, but she accidentally stands him up after experiencing some magnet trouble? And Dustin reunites with his bestie Steve, who's now working with a former classmate Robin at the mall's ice cream shop, Scoops Ahoy, and the three of them translate a Russian message that Dustin intercepted while trying to communicate with his new girlfriend, with Robin figuring out that the message must be a code. Eleven partakes in some psychic spying with Max and quickly finds out that all is far from well with Billy. Nancy and Jonathan discover that this rat problem is not limited to that one lady's rats, and Will gets in a fight with the gang because, well, Will just wants to play D&D and all his friends are into girls now. Instant MVP Robin figures out that the code points to a delivery by Russian soldiers at the Starcourt Mall. Joyce convinces Hopper that her magnet troubles originate from a device at the Hawkins lab, and he goes to check it out and is attacked by a guard, Grigory. Max and Eleven track down Billy at Heather's house, and all seems well until they leave when Billy and Heather attack her parents. Will senses this and realizes the Mind Flayer is still alive and well, and flaying minds apparently. Hopper gets the Hawkins mayor to admit the Starcourt Mall is a Russian front. Back at the Starcourt, the Scoops Ahoy crew recruits Lucas's sister Erica.
Do this for America, Erica.
And they become trapped under the mall as they investigate the Russians. Jonathan and Nancy are fired from the newspaper for harassing Mrs. Driscoll, aka Rat Lady, but Nancy visits her at the hospital and finds out that she's been possessed. Will convinces his friends that the Mind Flayer must have some kind of a hold on Billy, and they trap him in a sauna to try to overheat the possession out of him. It really only kind of serves to piss him off, and Billy uses his new super strength to escape and attack the kids, but Eleven subdues him. Billy returns to the mill, which now holds a bunch of Hawkins residents possessed by the Mind Flayer. Hopper and Joyce find a hidden lab in one of the abandoned properties that the Russians have scooped up, but are attacked again by Grigory. They manage to escape and even grab a Russian hostage, Alexei, and bring him to the only Russian speaker they know, our old friend Murray.
A little bit eccentric, but completely harmless.
The Scoops Ahoy crew hides from the Russians at the mall and see them try to force open a portal to the Upside Down. Nancy and Jonathan meet up with Will, Mike, Lucas, Eleven, and Max, and they theorize that both Driscoll and Billy have been possessed by the Mind Flayer. They go to the hospital to investigate, but Driscoll's gone and Nancy and Jonathan are attacked by their crappy old newspaper bosses who are also possessed. They manage to kill them, but their bodies then turn into goop resembling the Mind Flayer, but hey, at least Mike and Eleven made up thanks to the power of candy. Eleven manages to incapacitate the Mind Flayer in the hospital and it escapes into the mill. Robin and Steve are captured and drugged by the Russians at the mall, but the joke's on the Russians. The drugs just give them like a nice chill high. And they're rescued by Dustin and Erica. Alexei, bribed by Slurpees, tells Hopper, Joyce, and Murray that the Russians are attempting to open a portal to the Upside Down under the Starcourt Mall, prompting them to return to Hawkins to protect the kids. Eleven uses her powers to infiltrate Billy's mind, finding some nice memories and some decidedly not so nice ones. Billy reveals the Mind Flayer wants to kill Eleven as payback for closing the gate, and the possessed citizens, or the Flayed, all merged into a now very big Mind Flayer at the mill. The Mind Flayer catches up to the gang and wounds Eleven. After gathering some supplies, they head into the Starcourt Mall. Robin and Steve are having their own little drug-induced adventure, and Steve reveals that he has feelings for Robin, and Robin reveals that she's a lesbian, so they'll only ever be besties. Hopper, Joyce, Alexei, and Murray arrive at the fairgrounds in Hawkins, where they're spotted by the mayor, who alerts the Russians. Grigory kills Alexei, who actually turned out to be not so bad after all, and the rest of the group discovers that the Russians are looking for the kids at the mall. Eleven and company arrive at the Starcourt just in time to stop the Russians from shooting Dustin and everybody else he was hanging out with, but Eleven collapses from her injury afterwards. Eleven yanks the piece of the Mind Flayer out of herself, but it leaves her powerless. Hopper, Joyce, and Murray arrive at the mall and go to destroy the machine that's opening the gate to the Upside Down. The kids fight the Mind Flayer with fireworks, while Eleven frees Billy from the Mind Flayer's control. Billy then sacrifices himself to protect the kids. Talk about a last-minute redemption arc. Joyce and Hopper manage to get to the machine, but Grigory is there. Hopper kills him, but he gets trapped with the machine in the process, and Joyce still has to trigger the explosion before it's too late, and Hopper gets disintegrated in the process. Or so it seems anyway. But hey, the Mind Flayer is dead. 3 months later, the Starcourt is destroyed, the deaths are covered up, and the buyers, with a still powerless Eleven, prepare to move to California. And that's it, right? Nope! Mid-credits scene. Prison guards in Russia go to feed a captive to a Demogorgon, but not the American. Oh yeah, and a season 4 trailer revealed that Hopper's still alive, so I guess we actually did get justice for Hopper. And that's just about everything that's happened in the first 3 seasons of Stranger Things. We don't know about you, but we're certainly ready for season 4. As always, for everything Stranger Things, Demogorgons, Mind Flayers, and Upside Downs, you're already in the right place, IGN.